G'day. So, recently I made a video about the Canberra light rail coming to Queanbeyan. Now, since then I still haven't received a reply from the light rail support email address.
Thank you for your email. Your feedback and inquiry is important to us and will be forwarded. Note that if you are providing environmental, we will endeavour to respond to all queries within 5 business days.
July 15th, 2020. Hi, just letting you know it's been over 5 business days. September 28th, 2020. So I think we'll need to start coming up with some contingency plans. But is that really a bad thing? You know, was I wrong in my last video? Nah. But I did leave something pretty significant out. Come with me. Welcome to the Macca's parking lot. Now, one of these can be found in every medium-sized Aussie town out there, and they exemplify 2 big flaws in the way these towns are planned, which I'll get into later. Today, we're not talking about any medium-sized Aussie town, though. We're talking about
Dane Street across the Fergus Road, she whiz with the Q-Town flow. Ha! Sassafras and all the Cooma Road, it's my cool, I'm just letting you know. Yeah.
As the 12th largest town in New South Wales, Queanbeyan typifies the kind of, 35 to 55,000 medium-sized town that you find all across New South Wales, from Wagga Wagga to Nowra and everything in between. Well, almost, not really. We've got Canberra right next to us, so we don't need jobs or anything like that because they do it all for us. In fact, they do everything for us. Before the lockdown, I tended to go out to Canberra way more than I would go out to Queanbeyan, even with my Queanbeyan friends. Why is that? Well, I'm going to try to make a few guesses. Now, I can only name a handful of decent places in town to eat that aren't, chain restaurants or whatever. So you've got Lime Leaves, the Millhouse Cafe, a couple decent cafes on Crawford Street, and pubs Top and Royal. And all of these are in town, so if you live more than a couple of kilometres away and have to drive, then may as well just go all the way to Canberra at that point. Go to Marohn or Kingston, where there are actually really good cafes. Okay then, so what's the difference between the cafes in Marohn and Kingston and the cafes in Queanbeyan? Oh, well, I'm glad you asked, because it's actually a pretty simple comparison. Mostly, it's the infrastructure around them.
This is cold. Don't be afraid. Give us your lighter.
Kingston and Marohn versus Queanbeyan. Let's compare infrastructure. So the Kingston foreshore is a really nice place to just walk around and sip your coffee, look out over the water while you have a meal. And Marohn, it's got all these little red paved roads, all these trees, these streets closed off to cars. It's nice and quiet. Civic has some similar things. There's just you can just go out and have a good stroll around. So it's no wonder that people always go there when this is the best Queanbeyan has to offer. And something that you couldn't see in the previous photos I used of all of Queanbeyan's nicest places to eat was that all of them are surrounded by unpleasant, loud, and difficult to navigate roads if you're a pedestrian. Now there's one major exception to this dichotomy, which is Fyshwick, which is hell to walk around. It is awful, way worse than Queanbeyan, but nobody goes there to walk and do nice things like that. People go there because it's got heaps and heaps and heaps of stores, and Queanbeyan doesn't. See, that's a big thing I omitted from my light rail video. Why are all these people going to Canberra in the first place? Well, now we know. The jobs and the infrastructure. And while a light rail would be a much better solution to all the traffic and the emissions and the car accidents that I was talking about in my last video than just leaving things as is, it is nowhere near the best solution. So what is the solution? An urban design concept called the 15-minute city.
Discussions of urban mobility and unclogging cities often focus on travel speeds, enabling people to travel significant distances in short periods of time. This focus is misplaced. This history of cities, and work commutes, shows that travel speeds increase as cities spread out. We end up spending as much time travelling as before, only at faster speeds over longer distances. That's dumb. There is even a name for this, the Marchetti constant, and people unable to operate or unable to afford the faster mode of travel are left behind, able to meet fewer and fewer of their needs close to home.
Hey, who it is? Gee whiz from Canberra, man. I'm still riding push bikes cause I don't have a car. Used to have one, brah, yeah, 4 laser hatchback. No stereo when somebody stole a hubcap.
Access and proximity, along with safety, must be the concepts we build our city around. If our planning focuses on reducing the need to travel, we may be able to avoid constantly adding costly transport infrastructure in a losing battle against traffic congestion and overcrowded buses.
Now, luckily for us, Queanbeyan has already solved the problem of overcrowded buses by having a bus network so bad that nobody wants to use it. But traffic congestion, and more importantly, in my opinion, wasting time and resources and opportunities to get fit and healthy driving everywhere in the first place, is still left to figure out though. The problem with Queanbeyan's boring and sometimes hostile infrastructure is epitomised by the Canberra shops. Oh, sorry, that's a photo from the Soviet Union. There we go, this is the Canberra shops. You can see how I got confused. Now, location-wise, this has everything going for it. It's right next to 2 ovals, multiple netball courts and basketball courts, a high school and a primary school, and 2 really nice locations for going for a walk. There are no other shops for kilometres, and yet this place was designed so badly that most people in Canberra would rather make the drive over to Canberra than just, walk or cycle over here. And that's part of the problem, the walking and cycling. The surrounding area just hasn't been designed for that. It's designed to be driven to, walked in, walked out of, and driven away from as quickly as possible. Getting there by foot has been designed to be as unpleasant and painful as possible. I've been passing my days during this lockdown by challenging myself to walk down every single street in Canberra. Queanbeyan's going to be next. I'll make a video about that later, but one of the main things that I've learned is that Canberra's streets fall into one of 2 categories. 1, easy to navigate but loud and unpleasant. That's your Cooma streets, your South Bar roads, and then there's the second category, which is quiet and pleasant but a tangled, unnavigable mess. Now, part of this is just a lack of signage for walking routes. None of the paths that lead to the Allerton Drive extension from cul-de-sacs have any signs showing that they do, and none point towards major destinations with kilometres to go or time until arrival like they do in Canberra. Part of this tangled mess is, of course, that suburbia is designed to be secluded and private, and this is done by making it really hard to drive down a street on your way to somewhere else. Now, that's all well and good, I understand that. But the thing is, someone walking or cycling down a suburban street does not have the same impact on noise levels and nowhere near the same impact on air quality as a car. So it's no reason to not build a comprehensive, usable walking and cycling network amongst these twisted cul-de-sacs. There are actually some really good examples of this that I've stumbled upon around Canberra during my walks, but only the very newest of these are accessible by bikes and none of them have any signs. Now, the Dutch do a really good job of this. They have these things called hoofdnetten, which I probably mispronounced, which translates to main networks. Now, obviously we have a main network for cars, hence the design of the suburbs. We want people going down the Cooma streets, down the Canberra avenues, etc., rather than the residential areas. But what the Dutch do is they take this concept to a whole new level and make the walking and cycling main networks separate to the driving ones. And this just makes it safer and more pleasant for everyone. Canberra, which has the highest percentage of people who commute by bike of any city in Australia and is consistently rated the best city in Australia for cycling, has a bicycling cycling? Has a cycling network that goes across the whole city and even includes Queanbeyan, and is honestly the best piece of cycling infrastructure that is in the entirety of Queanbeyan anyways. Now, Queanbeyan has a little bit of this kind of action going on. There's a half-finished shared path down by the river that runs pretty much parallel to Cooma Street. And when Queanbeyan does build bike infrastructure, it usually builds it really well. But the problem with this infrastructure is that a lot of it just ends and a lot of it just isn't there where it needs to be. For example, there's nothing to use instead of Canberra Avenue. But look, even if Queanbeyan did make its shops more accessible by walking and cycling, there'd still be one glaring problem, and that's the job statistic that I brought up in my previous video. More than 60% of Queanbeyan's working population was employed in the ACT. Yeah, that's pretty bad.
For jobs, and growth. So we have a very clear plan for jobs and growth.
Now let's be completely clear. Growth for growth's sake is neither there nor here, because growth for the sake of growth itself is the ideology of the cancer cell. Don't get me started on pointless jobs. Guaranteed work is Bolshevik comic balls. Okay, I'm gonna stop. Alright, so when I was looking for that statistic that I used in my last video about 60% of people from Queanbeyan working in Canberra, I actually found, and I don't know how I didn't find this while I was researching the video like right at the beginning, but I found a Queanbeyan CBD master plan that was published when I was living in Sydney, so I completely missed it. But it's really good. A lot of the things I talk about in this video are addressed. Crawford Street, they're providing a separated shared path. They're planting more trees in like every street. They're adding pedestrian crossings in places that I have wished for pedestrian crossings for years. Widening footpaths everywhere. And Morrison Street, it will become a living system capturing and treating stormwater while passively watering the tree street plantings. And they're going to provide designated cycle paths through the CBD that connect to the other cycle paths. Low Street, cycle paths. Yes, Low Street needs cycle paths because it's right next to a school. A really good mark of a well-designed city is if kids can get to school and back by themselves without parents needing to drive them or supervise them. They're adding places for food trucks and pop-up stall events. These guys over here are playing Connect 4 in the middle of they're gonna finally add a cinema, which I mentioned in my last video that they need to do. Like, how good does this look? Laneways with eating. Anyway, back to the video. Now, according to the theory of the 15-minute city, each neighbourhood should fulfill 6 social functions: living, working, supplying, caring, learning, and enjoying. Now, Canberra actually does okay at a lot of these metrics. Supplying-wise and caring-wise, we actually do pretty well with the basics. So there's a grocery store pretty much within a 15-minute cycle of everywhere in Queanbeyan. And almost everywhere in Queanbeyan is within a 15-minute cycle from the Queanbeyan Hospital, except for Jarrah. But look, they like to pretend they're not Queanbeyan, so we can do the same when it suits us, then we can. But working, obviously, is where we fail abysmally. Now, obviously, there are still issues with the supplying metric because that's why everyone goes to Fishwick, or at least one of the reasons, the other being work. But I suspect that the solution to supply and work will be the same thing. And that solution will also tie in with the enjoyment metric. We would benefit a lot from more businesses, especially local businesses, because they do 3 things that big stores don't, right? They create more employment and they create better, more stable and more fulfilling employment. They also bring more money into the council, which can then be spent on the city, and they're much better for land values. They increase the value of the land, which is also good for the council. back in my day, instead of a Kmart here, there were a bunch of small businesses, and they were good businesses, and they all got kicked out by Kmart, alright? I think the bit's over. This was literally just for when I said back in my day, and then it stopped being relevant. Alright. So there we go. We've figured out a tentative solution that was honestly something that everyone already knows is good anyway. Hopefully you guys learn a little bit about walkability. So I guess the real takeaway from this video is support your local businesses, try to walk places, and I mean, if you're going to start a business, start it next door. And as a closing note, I was going to, instead of the Q-Town rap, have a clip of a Canberran reporter referring to Queanbeyan as Dreambeyan because I thought it would be funny. And it would have been funny, but I couldn't find the clip. Though while I was looking for the clip, I did find one thing that was honestly better than the clip I was looking for. And that thing was a comment on a Facebook post. And that comment is a bloke talking about why he doesn't like the name Dreambeyan, which honestly doesn't. No one needs to really explain that. But he talks about why he actually likes the nickname Struggle Town for Queanbeyan. Struggle Town is something to be proud of. The basis of it was the European migrants that came, usually with a trade in the 50s and 60s, to help build Canberra. Now, these post-World War II migrants didn't trust the government, and they didn't trust the ACT's 99-year leasehold system. So, they bought and owned their own blocks of land in Queanbeyan, outside the ACT, and they built a garage and they lived in that, and then struggled to build the house. They built and saved and never borrowed money from the banks, who they also didn't trust to safely keep their money. So, they slowly built their houses and never had any debt. Then, when they finished, they owned their house, they had built it, and this was a struggle, but it was a struggle with a goal at the end. Thanks for your wisdom, random Facebook user.
Yeah, no worries, mate.
Now look, back in those days, from what I've read anyway, Queanbeyan did seem like a more vibrant place to live. It had 2 movie theatres, it had an ice skating rink, they were hosting floral festivals, well, way before Floriade was a thing, and then things just went downhill. When most people say Struggle Town, they're referring to Queanbeyan in the 70s and the 80s. That's the kind of struggle town that the choir boys sung about. Their song Struggle Town is actually about Queanbeyan. You can check the Wikipedia page. But Struggle Town can refer to the kind of struggle of the post-war era again, but even better. And hopefully with less wife beating. You know, we don't have to go back to the 50s. We can work with the local government this time. Instead of the tradespeople helping to build Canberra, you know, they can help to build Queanbeyan. And small business owners working with the council is only going to make them better, as proven by their plan. You know, the council has some really good ideas for Queanbeyan. And this is the case for any town that's struggling. Any of those towns that I mentioned at the beginning of the video, those 35 to 55,000 Wagga Wagga to Nowra kind of towns, you know? And I'm sure many more. We just need a goal to struggle towards. But that goal can't be to transport people more effectively from Queanbeyan to Canberra. That's not going to be what makes Queanbeyan a good town. When that light rail gets built, it is going to be to transport people from Canberra to Queanbeyan. Check out the description for the bibliography and some further reading.